Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. And this is episode number 323.
All right.
So we're chugging along. I am your host, Don Irvine, and joined by my co host, as always, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, fascist pigs and all you other guys out there.
Are you picking this up from the riot, maybe?
We're back to being fascist pigs.
That's something. All right. Um, I just want to my brief weather commentary, as I like to interject, is like it's getting warm out there.
It's
Like,
getting a little warmer out there. It sure
yeah,
is.
I'm like it's muggy, it's
Yeah.
warm. It can get rather uncomfortable at night now too.
It's pretty darn sticky during the day. That's for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the U.S. Open golf starts tomorrow at Oakmont up near Pittsburgh. And they've had mostly a lot of the same kind of weather we've had. So the grass on that course is extremely dense and rich. And in the U.S. Open, on U.S. Opens, they always make the rough real high, right? They make you hit the ball in the fairway. So I was watching this guy, one of the players, out testing the rough the other day, and he dropped the ball, and it would just go to, you couldn't even see it, right? The ball is so far deep into that grass. So it'll be interesting watching, as a result of the weather that we've been having on the East Coast, watching these guys try to negotiate all that grass, because everything here this is the peak of the growing season. Everything is so lush. Every bush is full. Every tree is full. The grass is growing like crazy. We're headed toward the longest day of the year. It's full on. We're on it now. This is summer.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those years when things like that all kind of come into play. I think I look at my lawn, from a perspective, and I think it's probably greener than it has been in years.
Yeah.
And right, and it's
Yeah. Mine too.
and actually, more weed tree. I mean, we do have an outfit that treats the lawn, but it's been stubborn with the weeds. But I'm beginning to wonder too whether or not kind of a combination of forces between how long it takes to once you start working with a company, when they start treating your lawn to fight, to fertilize, and then also to fight the weeds, and also the conditions that, the more rain and all of these things that these guys done, the lawn looks pretty good. My complaint now is that the grass is too high. I just sent a message this morning to my lawn guy, who I've reluctantly turned over the lawn to, and I said, please cut it shorter this time, because they kind of have a standard thing,
Yeah.
but the grass, with all this weather, this rainy weather, this grass has come back with a vengeance, and I'm like, it's like, maybe we'll cut a little bit shorter so I can get a little more time, and everything like this, and all of that, because I don't want to feel like a week later I'm going to have to call the guy back and say I need another, I need you to come back and do it again. I want this to last at least a couple of weeks, and
It might be
I look,
tough for a while. It may,
yeah,
it may not be after a month or so. It may not be that bad, but that's going to be tough in this right now, because man,
yeah,
it's very wet. It's going to stay wet. There's more rain coming. Weekend of temperatures cool back off into the 70s. That's the other thing, is like, it's getting warm now, but it hasn't been warm. It's been a pretty cool, comfortable spring. So that promotes grass growth. If it gets too hot too fast, it's not this dense, right? This has been perfect conditions for really dense foliage all around the mid-Atlantic.
so we've been doing different things, and with some success, we've been trying to actually lay down this. You may have seen these things in stores before or whatever, where it's basically like a tarpy thing, but it's a covering you can put on your lawn or your yard, your dirt area, your garden area. You kind of clean it up beforehand and then lay it down, and it's supposed to prevent the weeds from sprouting through it. So we've been slowly working through this one section of the backyard that I've just hated for years. We've been going. This is a multi-year process. Clean it up, every 6 months, and now we're finally starting to kind of lay it down and then put some new mulch on there. I'm like, maybe by the end of the summer I'll have that part done, so that and then I'll try to maintain it going forward. I had ignored it for too long, turned into a jungle, and it was just it was just to me in the back. It became kind of an eyesore because it was just weeds, weeds that grow with a vengeance.
Yeah.
So I want to turn that into something that looks halfway decent. So we shall see it. Man versus nature.
There you go.
We'll see where that takes us. But anyway, so yeah, so fascists and whatever. We've had this eruption of violence and all kinds of things going on in Los Angeles. Uh, National Guard is out there. Our Marines have been called out by President Trump to try to quell all of this, and but the politicians, they're like deaf, dumb, and blind. What is the deal here?
Well, they're talking to both sides of their mouth, like Karen Bass. There's no riots here. What are you doing? We don't need this. There's no riots. There's a curfew at 8:00 tonight. Okay, so there's either riots or a curfew. There's either no riots or there's a curfew. But you can't really have both, right? If you're not having riots, you don't need a curfew. And so you also have, the governor, like, we do need this. We don't need this. Where are you when we need you? We don't need any troops. This is fine. And they're losing their chance to get back into power over this too, because people see like one side is promoting chaos and violence and throwing bricks at cops, and the other side is saying clean it up and get the criminals out of the country. It's like you think like they show on TV, the riots. They don't show the people standing off, from the distance going, this is ridiculous. You guys need to go home, right? Because that's not news. So all America sees is these images of riots. People are upset. They're fed up with Trump, and they're going to put a stop to Trump. This, and that, and the other. But what's happening is like the spell is broken. Just because left-wing corporate media says something doesn't mean it's true anymore, right? I mean, we're fighting in a whole different battleground now. So now when people say that, it's viewed as the political commentary that it is. So I think that the right thing is happening here. Trump is putting this down. They haven't shot anybody. They haven't overcome any court orders. It's interesting, that California tried to get a judge to enjoin Trump from doing this, and the judge like, I can't really help you here. A liberal leftist Northern California judge said, there's kind of, mumbled and stumbled and didn't do anything. So, a lot of interesting stuff going on out there.
Yeah. What's interesting, another thing that's interesting about this too, is that the administration took a different tack. They kind of adjusted on how they were going to deal with this illegal immigration problem. There's no doubt. I mean, no one can argue that Trump has not been serious about immigration, illegal immigration. And rather than go to homes and get warrants on people that they knew were in the country or suspected were in the country illegally, they decided to go to Home Depot.
Yeah.
Right. And anybody, I think this probably is replicated, almost everywhere in the country, right? You go to a Home Depot, maybe even a 7-Eleven or something like that. Yeah. There are certain places in the country where the day laborers, as I'll call them, they congregate. They're looking for a gig.
Like in Herndon, which is a mile away from me. Herndon sets up and says you can stand here and look for work. Right? You can only be at certain places, but they let you be at certain places to look for work. So they're so knowledgeable of this, that this is happening, that they've actually come up with a way to accommodate it.
Yeah. So on the Herndon thing, was that one where did Judicial Watch get involved with that years ago or something like that? I mean,
somebody did when they first set it up.
Yeah, right.
They sure did.
Yeah, so Montgomery County, I don't even know if it exists. I mean, I guess I could look it up, but Casa de Maryland, course, it's
Yeah.
Montgomery County. I mean, I think they set up a whole place where they could come and congregate. They could come and congregate, and they
Yeah.
could get picked up for day labor work and stuff like that. That was the authorized place in Montgomery County or whatever.
It was
Uh,
Gustavo Torres, right? Didn't he
yeah,
live? Yeah.
yeah, right. So they were doing that. I don't know if they're still doing that because I don't hear as much from Casa de Maryland as I used to.
Yeah, I think he moved on, and he was kind of the muscle behind it. You know, he raised the money and so forth. So that's another one that they got a lot of USAID money, and which it's not flowing anymore, right? That's put a lot of hurt on leftist organizations.
Yeah, and for a lot of these leftist organizations too, it's really kind of the loudest person in the room kind of shakes the cage a little bit, and gets some of the money and the publicity and everything like that. So if Gustavo Torres, if he's moved on, and there's nobody really to fill that role, no one willing to rattle that cage, no one willing to speak up and be that public persona, then it's harder for the organizations to stay afloat or get their money or attract the attention that they
That's right.
want, and everything like this. But I just thought it was interesting there. Yeah, well, Karen Bass, who I don't think there's any conservative in this country that really thought that she was going to be very successful in that job. And this is the kind of thing that happens, kind of shows is a test of your ability to lead. How
Yeah.
do you react when your city winds up in this crisis situation when there's anarchy in the streets? I mean, look, John
Right.
Fetterman,
And you're on the side of the anarchists too.
right?
I mean, this is a former communist revolutionary, right? She worked for Cuba. She is a commie. She is not she's not on the left. She's not left of center. She's a communist. Okay, she's fine with immigrants overrunning the country and there being no borders and so forth. So you're asking somebody to enforce laws that are duly on the books and that she's supposed to enforce, that she completely disagrees with. So, and this is her response. Like, I don't really have to do this. And like the Newsom's the same way. Like, I don't really have to do this. I don't, we can just be our own self, right? We don't have to do what federal law says to do. And so, because remember, like the easy way that, you don't want them going to Home Depot. You don't want them going in the streets and going into schools and all this, but you don't want to hand over people who are violent criminals, convicted violent criminals at a police station, right? Because then you're helping ICE and, sanctuary city and all this stuff, okay, where it's safe, right? Nobody gets harmed. The person we've already identified, this is the guy who did the bad thing, right? We want this guy. We don't want his whole neighborhood. We don't know whoever's with him. We just want this guy. Okay. So, I mean, that's how justice is supposed to work. It's a specific person does something bad. We punish that person. We prove it and we punish that specific person. So when we have people where we have established that they did the thing, right? And they're in the country legally. And all we're saying is get them out of the country, go be a criminal somewhere else, right? And you're not going to let us take them where it's safe. In a police station, they've been patted down. They've had handcuffs on them. You just go in there, you put handcuffs on them again, you take them down and put them in the car, you take them where they need to go, right? And a lot of times they don't need, have to be handcuffed on the ride, depending on the vehicle and how it works and so forth. So, they can work this, they can make this happen real easily if the local law enforcement will cooperate with ICE. But since, they want to make a point of not doing that, that's why they have all this property destruction going on all over Los Angeles, all these people being injured in these things, cops being shot, had rocks thrown at them and all this stuff, because the mayor will not hand over the people in the safety of the police station.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I don't know, how many of these people, what's the percentage of real criminals are going through this. Sometimes it's hard to you have to ferret through these things, but if you go up and if you're ICE or whatever, and you go up and you approach someone over at Home Depot that's hanging around waiting for a day labor job, and you can say, if you say, show me your papers or whatever, your documentation, and you don't have it, then you need to answer for that. I mean, think about the borders in like European countries, right? They hit those border checkpoints. Where's their identification? Where are your papers? You
Yeah,
know,
that's
you
right.
cannot cross an official, you know, checkpoint without your documentation, right? And if you don't have the right documentation, they will probably arrest you at that point.
Right. That's
Uh,
right.
so if you're, you know,
Routine all over the world.
yeah. So but here in this country, we operate under a whole different set of
Yeah.
standards, it seems, and Karen Bass is just emblematic of these liberal left, mayors and politicians that we've seen. I mean, we're getting these kind of echoes of the George Floyd, riots and things like that, where these politicians, they just stood by and they let their cities burn, and they let rioters and looters go through and destroy property, do all these kinds of things. And, I mean, you still remember, wasn't, we had them, talking about, there's nothing going on here, and you have literally a building on fire in the background,
Yeah, that's right.
that image,
The
still,
totally peaceful protests.
yeah, it's still there in my mind, is like, yeah, turn around.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Watch out. Let's get close to you.
Yeah, and so and then yeah, and there's Karen Bass, kind of divorced from reality. So now she's saying something about, I mean, there's the curfew. They have to kind of control. They need to kind of get a handle on the vandalism and the looting. Uh, one of the things I understand, I don't know if it's true. So Alphabet's had all these, had like five Waymos destroyed,
Right.
and part of that was that there was somebody there was some report that one of the reasons that this happened was that these rioters, they called for the Waymo. They
Yeah.
summoned the Waymo on their
And
app,
then burn it up.
and
Yeah.
then yeah, it's a driverless car, so no person gets hurt, and then they go destroy the car.
Right.
Well,
And then they have this, you ask them about it, right? And this is a very like matter of fact explanation. It's like, well, they're cars with no people in them, and they're taking jobs away from uh, gig economy workers, right? And it's like, you know, maybe both are true, but get to the part where you have the right to destroy these people's property, right? How does that give you the right? You don't agree with it, it's one thing, but it's like, oh, I have a simple explanation. Well, it's okay for me to violently burn up these people's property and beat up anyone who tries to stop me. No, you don't. You don't. You put yourself in these moral. You think you have moral high ground, and you don't. You're suborning criminal activity. You are coddling criminals. You are protecting them from law enforcement.
yeah, look, I mean, as I read the these most of these cars are Jaguars, EV Jaguars, that Alphabet Google uses, and so I think the average price of the vehicle itself, without all the gizmos, is like $73,000. Which is about right for an EV, give or take. And then they have to add all the technology on there to be able, the cameras and all that stuff that you see, in order for it to navigate, from point A to point B. And so that can add, $30,000 or more per car. So this is over $100,000 per vehicle easily that they have destroyed. They have destroyed $500,000 in property, just for Alphabet Google,
Yeah.
and they don't care, right? And yet these are the Alphabet, Google. I mean, by doing this, I mean, they are, yeah, are they taking jobs away from the gig economy workers? That's still yet to be argued, because they're gaining in popularity. I mean, the business model for Lyft and Uber, initially actually is that they provided these rides, and at a rate, because they were getting so much venture capital, they provided them at a cost below their cost, at a price below their cost. So they were losing money by the boatload, but venture capitalists just kept throwing them the money, because they thought, this has got to go somewhere. Finally, they kind of woke up, and they realized. I mean, Travis Kalanick I thought he was a visionary, but he wasn't a really good businessman, in the sense of he waited too long to try to turn the business into a business. Now they have people in there that have made a business of this. They've gone from not just driving people, but also doing the grocery deliveries, the Uber
Right.
Eats, your carry out orders, So now we've got this huge boom economy, but
I was at
there,
Mason yesterday for Marty's graduation. Marty graduated from high school, and you see these the little vehicles, the little digs that do like all the pizza delivery and whatever on campus is these little robot things that go across on the sidewalk. You just step around. They know how to step around you. You just step around them and keep going. It's pretty cool.
yeah, no, I mean, and look, so the only way that that the Uber and Lyft figure, know that they can make money long term on driving people from point A to point B is that they need to make it autonomous. That has always been on their board. But they took a while for them to get there. They're still trying to figure out. I'm actually with Uber. They got rid of a lot of that stuff that they were going to do, and they're still sticking with the real human being until they can figure out. But in the meantime, I mean, Waymo, the Google, Alphabet operation has been building up. They've had to do a lot of testing. San Francisco and Phoenix, where they're real test grounds. They've now expanded to rides into LA and other places, and it's not trouble free. I mean, there's issues with the driverless, cars, but there's a human in a control center watching over how that happens, and it's using artificial intelligence or whatever, and it continues to learn. It continues the more miles they travel, the more it learns about behavior of drivers and how to do things. They're not going to go particularly fast anywhere because that safety is their number one concern. So they will do odd things. But that is kind of the wave of the future, is this. And people I know who've ridden in these Waymos, they just think they love it. I mean, they think it's just they don't want to be bothered by a driver in a lot of cases. Some people like to interact with them. Other people would just rather get in your vehicle and take me from the Museum of Modern Art to my apartment on Fifth Avenue or whatever. That's the kind of thing they want to do. They just want to get home, or they just want to get to work. They don't really want to interact. They want to be able to maybe even be on their phone, make a few phone calls or whatever.
Yeah,
And
their
then,
issue is and will be for a long time is getting people to trust it. That
right,
take you
right. I
without
mean,
smashing you out the river or into a big truck or whatever.
right. I mean, there's always going to be there's going to be that. It's not going to be a perfect system. It can't. There's it's just hard to do that. There's so many variables. You can't teach a car how to deal with every single situation
Right.
that comes
Some of
across.
them, when I worked on the Hill, I lived off Quaker Lane in Alexandria, if you know where that is, and it's like Shirlington, that part of the world. And to get home from Capitol Hill, like my GPS gave me an instruction that if I would have followed that instruction, I would have been brutally blasted away by cars coming the other way. Right. I just had to know that they ain't right. Don't turn there where it says to turn. So, and that was a few years ago. So, I mean, I'm sure some of these things have been improved and so forth since then, but the basic, you're dealing with mapping, you're overlaying stuff onto old mapping software, and the roads change and so forth. So it's going to be really hard to keep up with it and give those things enough mapping information to get people to trust it. I think that's their, you'll have to be shown it works before you will treat it like something.
Right. I mean, I kind of operate on the trust but verify. Anytime I'm using my phone GPS, it's like I kind of know, if I kind of know where I'm going, but
I'm glad that, especially like around here, I'm glad that I lived here a long time before there was GPS, right? So I kind of know where these places are instinctively. I used to have, the Journal used to put out the map books,
right,
page 40, E7,
Yeah.
then you got to go find where 40 matches up and trace your way back to where you live, I mean, I was living in Northern Virginia and I was working on the Montgomery Journal for a lot of that time. Right. And so I was, I would start out in Virginia mapping my way to somewhere in Maryland, Blake High School or Sherwood High School or whatever. And that was a lot of putting those books
Yeah.
in the end and arranging, because there was a lot of maps you had to go from one to the
Well,
other.
yeah, you have, sometimes you have to go from the, you'd have the page, that opens into two, but you have to go to the next one to
Yeah,
continue on.
to
So it's almost like,
connect it and then find your way across the river down into Virginia. So it was pretty cool.
yeah, well, I mean, we we've lost our ability to actually know how to use a physical map. I mean,
Right. And a lot of these kids now, like I talk to them and they don't have any idea about what is north and south, and how far is McLean farther or Springfield farther. I don't know. Right. Is McLean farther or Gaithersburg farther? Right. You should be able to know that. Right. You should be able to say, oh, well, that's pretty obvious. Gaithersburg is farther. Right. But they don't know.
I definitely think that technology has dulled my brain because
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
It's
just
making you
turned,
take a lot of stuff for granted. I agree with
yeah,
that.
I've turned so much over to it. I'm like, I don't, there's not as much independent or original thinking that goes on, because it's like, oh, I'll look this up and see what it does and do that. But then again, there's some great conveniences of technology, and you love that. So there's always going to be a love-hate technology for me with all of that. But
Everything is from a young age, I was pretty good at sports trivia, right? Like the trivia that I knew, and I didn't know all sports trivia, but like if you asked me about the topics that I did study, I did have a bunch of raw information in my brain. And people used to, I've got calls from the bar. We were trying to sell this argument. You guys got to buy me 3 beers. Give me the, whoever won the whatever championship in whatever year. Right. I don't ever get those calls anymore because people just look it up online. The whole
yeah,
nature of arguments at the bar has changed.
right, yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I I participate on a friend's other podcast on Friday nights, which can be a lot interesting because I never know what rabbit hole we're going to go down with that. And the host will say a bunch of things, and I've tried to actually be the online fact checker, because I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I'm not so sure about that. And I just go a few mouse clicks or whatever, and I'm like, okay, I either confirm or say, oops, no, you're off, on that. But it's so easy to do that, to be
Yeah.
able to call that up. I mean, yeah, why do we have to store this information about some of that, those things? I mean, I don't, I can't, I think that, there was a time too, I think, when I knew a lot of sports stuff, trivia stuff, a lot of other things, but, I've kind of just like, the internet, you can just look it up really fast. So I don't bother trying to remember a lot of that stuff anymore. I just say, oh,
Right.
refresh my memory, let's go Google it. Okay, got my answer,
Yeah.
I'm good,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's,
There's
yeah,
some good and some bad to that.
right. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, but anyway, back to all this stuff that's going on in LA. It's just that, so we have Karen Bass and her just mess there. We have Maxine Waters saying there's no violence.
And there's like tons of violence.
Yeah. And then we have obviously Gavin Newsom, and kind of wonder, what is this, this Trump, Newsom fight,
Yeah.
what is
What's
Newsom?
funny is at one, 10 in the morning, Gavin Newsom has to say there's so much unrest about this that Trump has to back down. At 11, he has to come back and say there's so little violence here that Trump shouldn't have sent the troops, right? So he's got to make both arguments, constantly on the daily, right? And so, and the fact of the business is it's hard for him to hate on Trump because Trump does have his number, right? And every time they talk, it's not really unpleasant for either of them, right? Trump knows how to deal with big state governors. He's obviously done that a long time, and he's pretty good at it. And Newsom responds, right? So, but then he has to go out and say, oh, I hate Trump, and he did all these stupid things, So he's kind of in a box, and he kind of like almost everything he says sounds disingenuous, So I don't really know where he goes here. I think that he has to have this stop, right? If he wants to be president, your state can't be rioting for 2 years. You can't, you can't have total chaos the thing that you're now running, So I think part of him is saying, I do got to make this end for my state. I also think that they're looking at the poll numbers, and it's not good for them, right? This is an issue that taking out every illegal alien in the country is a 60-40 issue. 60% of the people in the country say take every illegal alien out, no matter what they're doing, right? And that's their stance. They're productive members of society for 25 years. Take them out if they're here illegally, right? Whatever it is. So then you have, on the other side, you have, his popularity is going down. Trump's overnights were nearly 56% last night. So, Trump is up, his it's up on the, those are 5-day running averages. So he's had a nearly 56, a 55, and a 54 in the last 3 days. So, it's at 52 now, but it's going up tomorrow and it'll be going up the next day. So you're giving Trump basically about 3 or 4 percentage points of support by continuing to have these riots.
Yeah, I mean Newsom. I mean, he is. I mean, he's looking at 2028, right, and saying, I want to run for president. I want to be the Democrat nominee for president, and I've got to figure out how to do this. I need to, on the one hand, I need to stand up for my liberal principles because I'm as a Democrat. On the other hand, I can't let Los Angeles just go crazy.
Right.
That's not good. I mean, Karen Bass notwithstanding,
she's not going to help you, right?
Yeah.
She's for it going crazy. She's fine.
Yeah. So he's got to figure this out. So he's trying to walk a little bit of this fine line, and I was trying to say earlier, John Fetterman, I thought was interesting because once again, Fetterman shows his independent streak on a lot of these things where he's criticizing, the Democrats for the way they've handled this, and just saying that, they lost their opportunity to take the high road. And so this is, which only exacerbates the problems for the Democrats as they head into other elections, is that they're given some chances to maybe look good or try to improve their standing, but they keep fumbling the ball on this. They just keep giving it away. So they don't come out of this looking good. They're not handling anything well at all.
Right. The problems keep mounting on them too. And the longer these things go on, you're now it's Seattle. They attacked the federal building. It's going on. They're trying to make it spread and look like the whole country's in uproar over this. When in fact, very little of the country is in uproar, and most of them want to see ICE succeed at what it's trying to do. So, the Democrats are going to have to come to a reckoning. They have a civil war in their party, right? Because you have the old hippie, because you watch their protests, right? It's all people our age or older, right? Retirees out there carrying their signs and yelling nonsense. And the other side, like the Hispanics, or I think Harry Enton had this thing. They moved from 32 points against Trump to 8 points for him in about a year over just this kind of stuff, right? So it's a 40-point swing. Like people want order in the streets. They don't want this. So I think Trump, he can't. There's always the danger of overstepping and so forth. But the Marines and all that is not, a few Marines to make things right, get everybody under control again, is not viewed as, the military attacking civilians and all this like they want it to be.
Yeah, no, I mean, what you were mentioning there with that CNN thing, I remember Harry Enton. I mean, I think he was pretty shocked that, between 2020 and 2024, 2025, the Democrats had a 32-point advantage on immigration, and it swung 40 points to now Trump and the Republicans have got an 8-point advantage. That's a huge swing.
Yeah,
Trump has sold that message well and has succeeded, and he's followed through with it, unlike the Biden administration, which promised a bunch of things and never delivered. With regard to that, I mean, they putting Kamala Harris in charge and all this kind of stuff. So there's a serious wave of things going on there. It's always interesting too with immigration about how there's just, you have these the liberals, they weep about things that are happening. Oh, these poor people. I think there's a local story here too where there was a Salvadoran festival of some sort. I think that takes place in Montgomery County or whatever, and the county executive Mark Elric, he canceled it because of fears of ICE and deportation and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, I don't, I think you have gone overboard on this, and you're only, you're
But
trying to
it
make whole.
says something about you and how you're running this county that you think we're better off not having a
Right.
festival than.
Yeah. And it's like you must know something about the people who are running and attending that festival
Yeah,
if you're going to cancel it after like 15 years.
right. That's right.
It's like, so it's just kind of a funny thing to say. It's just, but this is, once again, anytime you have these things in Montgomery County, you just never know.
Right.
But you can pretty much guarantee it'll be some crazy liberal doing something nutty.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
And like the sea is changing on this, right? They're the things are not like they used to be. Like, two stories from the last week. So there was a case that went before the Supreme Court that said, can you penalize white people in selection processes, right? Can you penalize them for not being people of color, right? And the court ruled 9-0 that you can't. There were two opinions. One of them was Thomas and Alito, but they were that's right, and their property. Thomas and Alito wrote a concurring opinion, but the controlling opinion was written by Ketanji Brown Jackson. So, this is the most liberal judge on the court agreeing that racial set-asides were unconstitutional. In fact, writing the opinion on that. The other one is, as you know, Terry Moran, ABC news correspondent. He went from a few weeks ago, he got an exclusive interview with Trump in which he tried to attack Trump on stuff, and Trump attacked right back and made him look bad. And then he released some tweets on X where he was talking about how Trump and Stephen Miller, their currency is hate, and they rely on hate, and they're just haters, and their capacity for hate and all this kind of stuff. And he was suspended, and then yesterday he was fired, or yesterday, the day before, he was fired from ABC News for those remarks. And the people at ABC News, the usual reaction is to circle the wagons and call Trump a Nazi and all that. But they're mad at him because they're saying, we can't go up there and present ourselves as credible journalists if we have people doing what you're doing, right? We're having people making these grand statements of how evil, the people we're covering are. So the readers are not going to, or listeners, watchers, whatever, are not going to accept what we say as the truth if we go around attacking them like this on our own time. So, he's free to say it because, the left comes at you with, this is a free speech. Trump's trampling free speech. Well, first of all, Trump didn't fire him. The leftists at ABC News fired him. And second of all, Trump, this is, they are protecting their brand, right? They're saying that, they can't credibly send out people posing as journalists who are saying stuff like this. So that's two things. Like, it was interesting to me that like ABC, the people who work at ABC, the rank and file people were like, this guy needs to go. He ran his mouth. Like, that's not what we're about. So, if you see an organization, and you remember ABC, they did the presidential debates, David Muir, and what's the lady's name with him? She has a funny name. Do you remember? Okay, but it's his co-anchor, I guess, on ABC World News Tonight. And they were the most biased newscast against Trump of any of the networks, of any of the cable or broadcast networks. 100% of what they talked about on Trump was negatively cast, according to All Sides, which is attempts to be an arbiter of these things.
Okay. So that's Lindsay Davis.
Lindsay Davis, that's right.
Yeah,
that's her name. And so they were the worst ones that could be picked. So Trump brought that up before the debate, during the debate, and after the debate, he went to the spin room and talked about it. So like ABC was the worst offender of all the networks that were biased against it.
Yeah, I mean the Moran situation was kind of surprising to me. I'm surprised that ABC News had the backbone to actually do that.
Yeah,
My initial analysis of this was that they were going to have a suspension. They would do their investigation, and they would they might keep him off the air for a little while, and then they'd bring him back. They'd slap him on the wrist a little bit, tell him like don't do it again, and then everybody moves on. But the firing, was really, surprising to that they actually went right there that fast. And we saw how the liberals, I mean, you mentioned the First Amendment, but they just went crazy over the suspension.
yeah,
They went after Bob Iger, who's no conservative,
right,
and all these things, and they started spewing all this hate towards ABC and Disney, and it's like, you love Disney and ABC. They're very liberal. They're very woke.
yeah,
But as soon as the guy gets hoisted on his own petard, it's like, oh no, 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 you can't do that. You have to keep him. It
yeah,
doesn't, it's almost like these people are a protected class. I
right.
don't care what they say. You can't fire them.
That's right.
Uh, you know,
You're giving in to Trump. It's like, well, yeah, I didn't give in to Trump. He did. He ran his mouth.
yeah. Look, and
He's the one who could not handle his Trump feelings.
Yeah. I mean, the Monday morning quarterback in the 2020 hindsight, to me would say, look, Terry, it's okay to feel like that. Go ahead and type it out
Yeah,
and just let it sit and never press
that's
post, or
right.
send.
That's like I see these articles. I read a lot of coaching stuff, and one of them it says, you get mad at your kid's coach, right? Write them a letter. Tell them everything they did wrong. Put that letter in the envelope. Put that envelope in your desk drawer.
Yeah.
Right. And you can save it. And you can review it from time to time and think of other points you should have made or whatever. Right. But don't send it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I probably have sent out a lot of ill-timed or bad tweets over the years. I don't know what they are anymore because I kind of send it and forget it and don't really think about it. But, and I think a lot of people are probably guilty about it, but there's a certain level you get to, where, it could cost you your job. You've gone
Yeah.
beyond the line. His job is supposed to be this journalist. He's working for a network. They're supposed to be unbiased, haha, and present the news and not be an opinionated guy. I mean, this is that his job is not opinion. That's not his thing. He's not the pundit or whatever.
Right.
So he crossed the line, and I think ABC news looked at this and said, maybe there's just no coming back from this.
Right. There's nothing you can really do for us because you can't be a reporter anymore, and that's really all you know how to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I don't think that Terry Moran's career per se is over, because in this world, you find a way, he can become the independent journalist and just start something, because that's what they tend to do. It doesn't take much to create a website, hang up your hat, hang out, and then start going ahead and doing it. So now he's really completely free. If he really feels this way, he can start some anti-Trump, anti-Stephen Miller.
You sure can. But here's the thing though. You lose a lot of influence, right? Not being on network to Tucker Carlson, right? He was a huge TV star. And when they took him off TV, like he has his little podcast and what he does, he's done a pretty good job of monetizing it, but he's the best at it, and he's not doing much. Like he's not part of the conversation anymore.
Yeah. I mean,
he's not.
Megyn Kelly is making a nice
she's making a good faith effort at it too. But I mean, Megyn Kelly's perch is a lot smaller than it was
before.
Right.
They lost their big soapbox, right?
Right.
Without the eyeballs of Fox News, you can't, it's very hard to duplicate that on YouTube or whatever they're using, any internet source. There's some people that are super successful at this, and they have their followers. I think, and I do think that Megyn Kelly does a pretty nice job. My problem with Megyn Kelly is that I need to find a filter for that, because she drops
She
so
got
many
potty
f
mouth, didn't she?
yeah, she does. She drops so many f-bombs. I'm like, I can't watch it anymore. It's like
Yeah.
it's just it's unnecessary. I don't care who you are, right, center, left.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
You
Like,
don't
say
need
it without cussing.
you
I
don't
managed to do that. Like, I
you,
coach these kids. Like, you don't think they drive you to cuss sometimes, but I
yeah,
don't ever cuss out or
yeah,
where they can hear it ever.
yeah. You don't need to be Bobby Knight.
Right. That's right. I get you. If you can't get your point across without cussing at kids, then you shouldn't be doing it. And it's the same as this.
Yeah,
You know,
we
the
had
occasional one slips through, and it can be effective as I'm so mad, right?
yeah,
I'm so doggone mad, right? Or whatever you want to say, put in there. But if you're doing it 10 times a show, I don't get that shock. Like,
yeah.
wow, she really knows she did that 10 times
Yeah,
already.
I know. A continual litany of F Joe Biden, F Joe Biden,
Yeah.
or F Kamala Harris, and everything. You lose your effectiveness. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's not a bomb anymore.
no, the bomb is like kind of like you said when it comes out kind of unexpectedly. I mean, if you're in the locker room at halftime and you're just really disgusted with the way your team's played, and that you've accidentally let go an F bomb or something like that, that will resonate with your players because they're not used to hearing that, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, it must be serious if he said it
He's
now.
really mad, this guy. He
He must
means it.
really be
Yeah.
mad if he did let that one go, because otherwise he's been like the person who never drops a cuss word.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just so different, with that how that goes on. And thank you, Hollywood, for teaching our children and others that it's perfectly fine to cuss.
Yeah.
It's okay, and it's a
Yeah.
perfectly
We've really
normal.
moved the last, 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe COVID had something to do with it. But like, cussing used to be a thing that you didn't do much, right? And
Mm.
you could do it with the boys, but not around girls. And girls kind of really didn't do it at all, and never around kids. And, on TV, only in very limited situations, late night, screened by the censors. And now it's just, whatever people want to do.
I noticed too, you know, I subscribe to several streaming services, and I watch a bunch of different shows, and now I'm looking back at some of these shows, um, like NBC. Well, their streaming service is called Peacock, and it just struck me the other day. I was watching one of their shows, one of their SVU spinoffs, or Law and Order spinoffs, and the amount of cuss words that's in that program. Now, that program cannot. I don't think it can air on traditional television with that. I can't imagine that that the regular networks would allow that amount of cuss words. But all of a sudden, all these cuss words are coming out. I'm like, whoa! It's like when I was a kid, you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
There were rules about that, and is it really that necessary? No. You could, television and movie. They showed for a long time. You can produce a very nice, a very effective, enjoyable program, movie or sitcom or whatever you want to do, without using the swear words. And then somewhere along the line, they came in there because it's like, oh, this will make people cool. So then kids think it's cool, and
Yeah.
I think, when I was a teenager, I think I got it. I got sucked into that. Everybody you're with, everybody's like dropping a swear word every 10 words, and then you're like, but why?
That's right.
What is it? What's the purpose? So,
Yeah. I
uh,
always had like before pulling me back from that. My dad, I heard him cuss one time in my life. Right. He just didn't do it. And if you did it, he got mad. He straightened it out. So it's like, hey, it was hard. You learn there's a place for that, right? Where he can't hear it. That was the
yeah,
place.
yeah. So I wind up dancing around it by going like, what the freak is going on here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's you kind of get the gist of what's going on there, but that's it. I've tried to stay pretty clean for the last
Yeah. I do
40
the
plus
same thing.
years.
Yeah. All the
You
words
know,
that sound like it.
yeah, you get something that's
And all
close.
the G's and Pete's and all that is, getting around,
Yeah,
other stuff.
right. There's plenty of that. I do want to, in some of the time we've got remaining here, is just talk about Elon. So Elon and Trump had a big blow up. Elon had a lot of unnice tweets, just some tweets and things like that. And now he's come back and said, I regret a lot of those tweets.
Yeah.
And so it looks like he's trying to make up, because in reality, Elon needs Trump more than Trump needs Elon
Right.
for a lot of things, right? I think
That's right.
is kind of where the bottom line is.
I think Elon had to test that to know
Yeah,
like who was the needed partner and who was the unneeded partner, and I think he got his answer.
yeah.
You know,
And
but
I'm not,
also, if you look at like the movement, the conservatives and the MAGA movement or whatever, we all kind of said, "Hey, Elon, make up." We're not even judging the rightness or wrongness of it. We're just saying, "Hey, Elon, you guys got to straighten this up. It's probably got to come from you." And so he did, and that's what he's trying to do. And my suspicion is that the actual tiff has been over for a long time, and that they're cooperating quite. You can see some stuff. There's some stuff out today where Elon is backing Trump's position on stuff. So you can see that that's what they mean. They're coming back. They're going to get back together. They're also they're aligned on so much that like others are not aligned on, and that they're two of the few people in the world who see the way that some of this stuff has to play out. So like they can't abandon each other. They need each other.
Yeah, and I think it was time anyway for Elon to go back and concentrate on his companies.
Right. I think it was, there was always going to be like sort of a weird adjustment when he backed out of doing Doge daily. But he said when he started that I'm only going to do this a few months, and then I'll have other people doing it. And people think Doge is done. Doge is just getting started. Right. They're going to apply that method every government agency that they can. And where they find waste, they're going to cut it. And where they need to rescind funding, they're going to rescind funding. Right. We're not going to keep wasting money on the same stuff we were wasting money. They may waste money on some new stuff now, but they're going to have to change because Doge is going to catch up. It's going to vacuum them up.
Well, I mean, the Social Security Commissioner said the other day that they're Doge, they want to use Doge with a Social Security Administration. I believe the courts have ruled that Doge can have access to Social Security records to try to help clean things up, because there are problems within the Social Security system in terms of
checks to dead people and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, it's antiquated computer systems and things like that. And there's also a story. There's also an interesting story too about how their employees at Doge are afraid of getting doged.
Yeah.
I mean, no one is sacrosanct in this whole type of thing.
You better keep working. You better keep producing. Numbers.
Right. And I know there's a lot of criticism, about Trump. Well, Musk didn't reach the amount of money that he said he was going to save. But I think we talked about it. This is not a short-term deal. You can't just do this right away with our federal government. But if you can change the way of thinking, the way that we do
get the
things,
momentum head in that direction.
Yeah, and then you work on that. Then over time, I think you can find a way to control and contain the budget. It's like we're at 7 trillion. I think this is where we need to look at 7 trillion, or maybe a little bit above that as kind of the cap, and say now we need to find a way to reduce that. We don't want this thing to increase anymore. This is our high watermark. We are now going to go and see if we can get that down to 6.5 and 6. And
I mean, they're already reducing the deficit. The deficit's going down. We're having positive quarters.
So we'll see how that all turns out. But I think there was a lot the media made of that breakup that was just kind of like they were dying to see that happen.
They were wishful thinking.
But it's good. It was good theater. And all that. All right. Well, we're kind of rounding the bend here, so let's just go ahead and wind it up.
All right. Let's see. What is on there? Greta's flotilla got intercepted. They're trying to pretend that they're bringing food to Gaza, right? Israel gives food to Gaza every day. and plenty of it, and that's not the problem.
Well,
And now Israel has worked to get it out of the hands of Hamas, so the food actually reaches the hungry people.
And she didn't have that much to begin with.
Yeah, that's right. Let's see what else is on here. CPI is below expectations, and once again, the people who told us that tariffs would ruin the country are wrong. They would not have brought Kilmore Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. to face charges unless they had an ironclad case. Other people, they're going to dismiss those charges. No, they're not. Big beautiful bill has to go by the 4th of July. Yeah, I think that's right. I like Trump's baby account proposal. I think that it's a backdoor way into entitlement reform. Okay, because the thing that freezes everything in place on entitlements is, we cannot have our old people, trapped with no money and no food, right? Eating dog food or whatever, right? That's how all this stuff got started. That's how they built the case for it. So if you have something where we're building generational wealth, where instead of putting it into a government account where the government pays you and the minute you drop dead, they stop paying you, put it into something that you own. So when you drop dead, your family still owns it. Your kids can benefit from it, right? That way, like every generation should come closer of a family in the United States should come closer and closer to being out of poverty, right? You should be able to move up income levels on that really fast. Simone Biles is probably the best athlete in the United States right now. Apologized for what she said to Riley Gaines. Said she shouldn't have let it get personal. I think she's sincere about that. They're talking about men competing against women. I've often said, if you get a team of, I'll coach it, right? I don't, I've got, trans, people. You want to have a trans league, then make a trans league. But the idea that they get to just insinuate themselves into the girls' competition when they are not girls is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's part of the rub there with all of that, and people don't quite.
It's a tough thing, and like I've always been on, include everybody, right, and let all the anybody who seriously wants to play and is willing to work, let's figure out something we can do with them, right? But that's not what this is. You're setting up something unfair, and I think in a lot of cases it's for the sake of making this point that we can take your competitions from you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you ignore the absolute fact that boys and girls or men and women are different, they have different body structures and ability and things like this, then you have to you cannot allow them to identify as the opposite sex and then go ahead and then compete against those people. So it's a ridiculous notion. I mean, there was a story there just about in Israel, they're using more women now in their defense forces, but they haven't been able to get them to the combat lines yet because they're not there yet. They suffer too many injuries and things like that in training. So they're not, they will put them on certain positions, but they just won't put them on the front line yet because they don't have the ability to withstand all of that goes on there.
Cool stuff,
yeah. So I think we all understand. Most people understand the physical limitations of men and women, but the far left, has been pushing this other narrative. So anyway,
and I'm all for, hey, break down all those limitations you can. If you can say it's a limitation now, 5 years from now we can do this, that, and the other, and it won't be a limitation. Okay, let's go. Right. But while it is a limitation, that's the thing about so much of this that we talk about is those are governing as the world really is. And there are people who are governing as the world wishes, as they wish the world was.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think that female athletes have just progressed so much over the last 10, 15 years. It's unbelievable. So there's a certain amount of almost parity that's coming with certain aspects of things in certain sports where it doesn't require as much physicality maybe or something like that. Anyway, so we're out of time. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. And we have Flag Day coming up on Saturday and Father's Day coming up on Sunday. And wait a minute here. Let me see if I can do this or not. I'm going to try to find this file. Okay. I got to look at this thing and see what I got in here. There we go.
Look at that. That was us yesterday.
Yeah. Happy Father's Day. Congratulations to the graduate.
Yep.
So, yeah, I saw this picture and I thought, okay, I went to screenshot and I just didn't label it in my file. So I'm like, oh man, I've got like 3 of these things. Which one is it? All right. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining us. Enjoy. There's some happy moments there with Brian and his family. So that's great. And we'll see you again next week.